Well, I have Josh Greene with me from the Mather Group. He's the CEO, and they provide digital expertise to help companies boost and really understand, fix, and improve all of their results online from Google and Wikipedia. And they really customize it to your situation. So they've worked with very large Fortune 1000 companies, and they also have worked with 5 of the largest nonprofits in the US. They work with popular media channels, and they are the 3rd largest network provider in the US. So they also work with 2 of the largest manufacturing companies and software. So you can see that they have a lot of different verticals that they work in. And so he's going to be talking to us today about managing this reputation online, what kinds of things we should be thinking about. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Josh, and thank you so much for doing this. Let me know when you're done, and we'll end it there. But I do encourage you as we end, please do reach out to Josh on LinkedIn. Again, it's Josh Greene with an E on the end, and it's Mather Group, the Mather Group, M-A-T-H-E-R. So reach out to him, tell him thank you, and also if you have follow-up questions, be sure to do that. We're recording this, and then we'll go ahead and get that out as soon as we possibly can. So over to you, Josh. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Priscilla, and thanks for having me here today. We'll be talking about online reputation management. We should have time at the end, and if you have questions as we go along, just put them in the chat, and I'll sort of answer them in stream as well. I think Priscilla did a great job of the introduction. So the short version is we're an online reputation management company. And for a lot of companies, that means what happens when someone searches on them, when someone goes to Google. You know, it tends to be the first thing, and it's not just search results. You've got mixed in, you've got ads, you've got company pages, Wikipedia, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, maybe Yelp, and plenty more. So there are 4 key things that we usually talk to our clients about, and I'll be going over today. They're Google search results, their review sites, corporate Wikipedia pages, and CEO search. The first one is Google search results. You'll usually hear SEO or SERPs as a discussion. The search engine result page tend to be very important, and there are 4 major areas that you'll see. You've got some paid ads here going on. You've got what are sort of the typical organic results, which is what everybody always thinks about when they think about natural search, is just what does Google think the right results are for a particular query. And then over on the right side here, you've got the knowledge panel, which this part is telling you all the data points that Google thinks fall into the knowledge panel. A lot of times you'll see Wikipedia there. And then you'll also see Google My Business below, which is really important if you have 1 or more physical locations. And then the other interesting thing is if Google figures that you're the definitive answer for this particular query, they're going to have some site links in here with what they think will be the most useful results for that query within that website. One of the other sort of interesting things going on is you'll oftentimes see brand advertising here. In this case, you're seeing Carvana and CarMax both showing up on the same phrase. It's one way that your advertising can give you a little bit more in the way of visibility, even on a competitor's trademarks. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, in a lot of cases depends on whether you're the big company or the little company in this situation. There are 3 main factors that generally happen with SEO. There's content, there's your site profile and domain authority, and there's your backlinks. And we'll go into each of those a little bit later on. When I say a little bit later on, I mean in the next slide after this one. One sort of tip or trick if you're thinking about SEO is you can see what you see in Google if you search on us. You get a title that's in the code on our website, the Mather Group, Nice People, Great ROI. And then you have what's called a meta description, and that's powering what you see as the description in here. And about 50% of the time, Google will just grab that description rather than crawling your page for what it is. So if I wanted to impress my kids, I could change this to the founder of Paw Patrol, and I'd have a little bit of street cred with them. The other nice thing about this is in here, there's what's called the open graph and then some Twitter things. Basically, that's allowing your content to be shared correctly. If you've ever seen on, say, Facebook, someone shared something and there's like half a picture or something like that, that's probably because this wasn't set. The nice thing is most of the authoring or content management systems out there, ranging from WordPress to Drupal to Wix, have a lot of this built in. So you can get almost 80% of the way there just out of the box, is sort of a good thing as opposed to how technical you might have needed to be 5 or 10 years ago. So the first thing that goes into that ranking is just how strong is your site. So if you're Amazon or Wikipedia and you create a new page, it's almost immediately going to rank in the top 3 because in a scale of 0 to 100 for domain authority, they're right at the very top. If I create a new blog, I'm going to have no domain authority, so it's not going to be very strong, and it's going to have a much harder time ranking well for something. The second thing is just the backlinks to your site. Every link from another site generally counts as a vote. So if you have some articles in the LA Times, the Washington Post that link back to your site, that's like having one of the popular kids vote for you. The more links you have from the more valuable sites, the more your site will just generally rise up in the rankings as well. That's part of what's, for example, made Wikipedia so powerful is there are hundreds of thousands of links to Wikipedia, so Google treats it as a very important site. And the third thing is content. And I would say at this point, content is just a tiny bit overrated for SEO. Almost every company is good at cranking out content, so they do that. They're used to the idea of talking about what they do. They're not used to asking people for links to their sites and things like that. So there is a whole industry built around helping you blog and create content. Which is great and can be useful for a lot of reasons. For SEO, the other two things are almost equally as important and often get overlooked. One other sort of tip is if you're searching on something for your company or you as an individual, this over here is called the knowledge panel. It's got a ton of information about your company. And this knowledge panel, if you claim it and sort of verify your ownership, you get to have a lot of influence over what happens right here. And you also keep anyone else from claiming it. So that if you do see that under an entity you're involved with, I would encourage you to claim that and sort of click through. The next thing that sort of plays a huge role is review sites. Everyone sort of got used to this when Yelp started out. And now there's a review site for just about every vertical that's out there, ranging from doctors to CEOs to cars to restaurants and homes. So there's a lot all across the board in terms of review sites. And there's usually 2 pieces of information or suggestions we give to people in terms of what you can do with reviews. The first is just doing good work. You need to be doing good work that people are happy about, and otherwise you're not going to get good reviews unless they're totally fake. And the second one is asking. This has sort of changed over time, but if you don't ask people for reviews, you're basically asking or hoping that the internet, out of the goodness of its heart, is just going to be nice to you, which is not a great viewpoint to take on the internet. Just to give you an idea of a couple things in terms of just what a rabbit hole this can be. The first is you can flag reviews if they're inappropriate, they're about the wrong company, if they're about your political viewpoints. Just about every site has a flag is inappropriate or report a review. If you've got a couple people at your company who are active on that platform, that helps a lot in terms of getting that paid attention to. And even those sites like Yelp will swear up and down that being a customer of theirs doesn't impact anything. We've found in practical terms, you seem to have much better results if you're an advertiser, so you can take that for what it's worth. But you know, funny story, a lot of apps that you use will ask you if you'd like to rank their app from 1 to 5 stars. If you give it 5 stars, they'll take you right to the iTunes store to leave that 5-star review. If you give them 1 to 4 stars, they take you to an internal website where you can leave your review. Someone may actually read it or not at some point, but it'll never be seen publicly. So if you're ever wondering how some of these apps get, you know, 900 5-star reviews and no negative ones, there's usually something like that going on in the background. There are a couple things that we've found particularly useful for managing in this area. Microworkers and Fiverr are both very good for using people for a very short amount of time for small discrete tasks. Upwork's very good if you need an expert for a couple of hours. We've had a couple times where we've had Google Analytics, JavaScript questions for triggering events. And, you know, if you can hire someone for an hour who like wrote code for Google Analytics, that tends to be a much, much better solution than bumbling around it for days. So we've gotten a lot out of Upwork across a wide variety of areas. The third of the 4 reputation areas is corporate Wikipedia pages. Especially if you're a bigger company or organization, it plays a big role in how you're showing up. It's powering things over here to the right as part of the knowledge panel. And as I mentioned, it's almost always a top 3 search result. So you can see that's almost 50% of the space here is being taken up by things. And people tend to view that as an objective result. So it's really important to make sure the information is out there. So we'll talk through that a little bit more. One little tip that you'll be perhaps interested in if you have a page, every Wikipedia page has these 5 tabs across the top. If you click on View History, there's an option called Page Views, and it'll tell you how many page views any Wikipedia page is getting. So in this case, IBM's having 4,000 people visit their Wikipedia page a day. Given that can be employees, potential employees, stakeholders, foreign entities that they might be doing business with, it sort of points to the value of being involved with that. And then you can always sort of see what a strong page looks like. The first 2 things I always look for is there a table of contents sort of breaking down some different areas within the page? And then is the info box over here filled out with recent data? Usually if the data is out of date, that's usually a sign that the rest of the page may need some cleanup as well. One other thing that tends to be, and this sort of follows up on Priscilla's question, if you're a smaller company, unless you're getting a ton of press coverage, it's very difficult to set up a page. The people who believe in a free encyclopedia that's collaboratively driven and the people who are pro-business do not necessarily overlap a whole lot. So a new page can be very hard, but there are a lot of category pages where if you're a new company and doing thought leadership, there's an opportunity to put some information out there, get links back to your site and some recognition. So we can go through some in the Q&A, but like if you look at the business process automation page in Wikipedia, it sometimes even says we need more citations, we need more information. So that's one way to get a much better reception with Wikipedia, versus sometimes setting up your own page gets viewed as a marketing strategy and taken down, which is not a desirable outcome if you spend a ton of time developing a page. The other thing that happens if you don't take a look and manage your Wikipedia page from time to time is controversy just keeps growing and growing because people like talking about it. When I used to work at Discovery, you know, Discovery channels worldwide, there's like 15 channels as part of it. And there'd been a very brief hostage incident at one of their facilities for about 15 minutes. No one was hurt, but half their page was devoted to the hostage taker guy, his manifesto, where he went to high school, just because no one had ever gone through and said, hey, this should be either its own separate event or not part of this page. And you end up with things like that because Wikipedia attracts a certain type of content and editors, so that sometimes you need to pay attention to that and try and manage it a little bit better. And the fourth thing is really how your CEO of your organization shows up in search results in Wikipedia, mainly because you want to avoid getting this look when they take a look online at how they're showing up. The easiest way to figure out if you've got an issue is just if you search on your CEO, do you cringe? That's usually a sign that there's probably some sort of issue there. You know, our running joke about when is the worst time to have a Wikipedia page edited is usually 30 seconds before they decide to search on it and see something that's only been live for a tiny bit of time. There's some interesting examples of this. This is Jeff Bell, who's the CEO of Legal Shield. He's got pretty typical results for a CEO, except in his Wikipedia page, he's referred to as a marketing leader in air quotes, which is generally not how you want to be referred to in anything. And it's one of those things that would be an easy fix. It's got no reason for being there. But instead, anyone who sort of looks and searches at him is just going to have this subconscious question mark of why that's there. Here's an example of a positive CEO search result. So this is Annie Young Scribner, the CEO of Godiva. It's got some nice results here. She's on the board of Tiffany's. She's the CEO of Godiva. She's featured in Bloomberg. So a nice write-up of her. And then on her Wikipedia page itself, this is certainly a nice page. It's got a picture of her. Sort of a fun fact about Wikipedia, it's super concerned about copyright, so you can't use professionally shot photos. So a lot of really famous people who've probably had a lot of professional photos taken sort of show up with selfie type pictures. And then it's got a nice bio and where she works. So this is sort of a very positive Wikipedia page. This is not quite as positive of a CEO page. This is Oscar Munoz, the CEO of United Airlines. And back when people were flying, they had, some of you may remember, dragged someone off a plane. And in this write-up here, it's called Everything from a Disappointment to a Self-Immolation of Startling Proportions, which is a great turn of phrase. I'm kind of envious of whoever wrote it, but is definitely not the neutral tone that Wikipedia is supposed to have in it. Although at the moment, I suppose he has probably bigger problems than his Wikipedia page he's dealing with. The other interesting thing is some of the SEO tactics that we talked about can also push down negative stories. So in addition to surfacing good stories, you can get a little bit fairer of a shake in terms of pushing down negative stories that are there. And just one bonus idea, since I think a number of people are focused on advertising, retargeting can do really well. In addition to the stereotypical, I bought a watch on Amazon and now it's following me everywhere I go. Especially in B2B situations, you can get your message out 10 to 40 times more. And we've seen for a lot of B2B companies, even those that are spending tens of thousands of dollars on pay per click, they only need to allocate $5 to $10 a day on the retargeting front to show up in a lot of interesting places and have a huge impact. And just some examples of the different places. So some key things that are worth thinking about as you think about online reputation. There are a lot of free resources out there. Moz.com, MOZ.com is really, really good for search. Wikipedia has a ton of trainings because they're interested in getting people to show up. A lot of this is experimental. The guidelines versus rules change fairly regularly. Yelp has gone back and forth about 1 million times on what's acceptable and what's not. Knowing who's going to manage things is helpful, just so you have someone to go to in terms of an organization if you're trying to figure out a particular situation. And sometimes good press, if you are able to get some or manufacture some, tends to push down a lot of these problems in terms of reputation. So that's also something to keep in mind. So with that, I saw that there are a few questions, so we'll be able to dig into those. And I see, Priscilla, there are a couple of questions already in here. For whatever reason, the screenshot that you had shared is going to take me a second or two to download. But the sort of question was, if the knowledge panel doesn't come up when you Google your brand, can you share a screen on how you would do that? So the answer to that is yes, we can talk through that. And if you just wanted to walk through real quick what that screenshot was, I can talk through it.
Huh. So
there it is.
Yeah. So I Google myself, and there's a lot that comes up, and I'm sure everybody could just Google themselves and see what this looks like. But then what I see over, you say about claiming that knowledge base, I don't see anything over on the right of Google. It's like it's completely blank. So what is it that's missing here, and how would you go about remedying this?
Yeah.
Look, you also figure into my search. Look at that. Don't miss Josh Greene. So there you go.
Much appreciated. So usually a knowledge panel triggers after Google figures it has enough information to sort of have a definitive idea of who someone is, and they've hit whatever that tipping point is. Usually having a Wikipedia page is one of those things, tends to be the crucial one. But also if you have profiles on Crunchbase and LinkedIn and some other things, that can generate one too. There was a really good article on Search Engine Journal about how to generate a knowledge panel, or what things to create if you don't have a Wikipedia page, to get one triggered over here. I think that, you know, what's very nice here is that you have a lot of very positive stuff here. There's no negative things. So that's really encouraging in terms of when people search. And then I think over time it gradually develops. I would encourage you probably not to try and set up a Wikipedia page. Wikipedia as a community really dislikes people in the marketing and advertising space because they assume it's advertising, which it may or may not be true. It just makes it a whole lot more difficult to set up a Wikipedia page for an individual at the moment. So I would look at some of those resources that are out there if you do want a knowledge panel to show up. I think having the Twitter feed here is awesome because a lot of people don't get that. And I think it lets you tell your story really nicely. So that's, I think, a hugely positive thing for people Googling you.
Awesome. Another question, you mentioned earlier on that backlinks are very strong and they build your reputation and they build your ranking. And especially if you're getting backlinks from highly reputable sites, obviously you mentioned Amazon or Wikipedia are going to really figure into that very quickly. But how do internal links within your own website help in this strategy?
They help some. So there's an entire school of thought and body of research about how Google rank sort of flows throughout a site, and which pages Google gives more oomph to and less oomph to. To some extent, it depends on how your site is set up. The idea is if you figure on a home page you have maybe 100% Google juice, and then you allocate it to two different pages, theoretically each of them would now have 50 points, and then you could sort of pass it along to different points in the site. So it comes into play probably a lot more on really big sites or really big e-commerce sites. What you're sort of seeing here is you just think about it as if you're Google's probably saying, these are the three major areas that are trying to be highlighted on the site. And then these are sort of your normal menu items. So if you had 100 points of Google juice, each one of these would probably get about 33. If you, thought it was really important that it was these two things, you could put like a no follow link on the digital transformation, and Google might count each of these two for 50 points rather than 33, is basically the theory on how it works. The challenge with that is for most sites, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. Like if you're also, because it depends on how many pages are on your site as well, where that really starts to make a difference. So if we did sitemap.xml, which is a little hack to see the sitemap for just about any site, we're taking a look here at the different sitemaps on here. And, my guess is this is pretty typical. You probably have about 30 pages on your site. It's not going to make a huge practical difference if you start trying to do PageRank sculpting, because Google has a pretty clear picture of what's on your site. It probably has a pretty clear picture of which pages people are linking to and which are found valuable. So you theoretically could give more prominence to particular pages depending on how you link internally on your website if you wanted to. One sort of easy way of thinking about it is if you took the 22 pages on your site and collapsed them into one page and had one really long page, that would be the page everyone would go to, but it probably would have some impact on that, depending on what you were trying to get to.
Awesome. I just, one of the big things I took away from that was that I'm not the only person who refers to it as Google Juice.
Yeah.
So thank you. I thought it was just me, but it's the easiest way to explain it. Awesome. Okay, so with small and medium brands, and actually, one person that's on this call is related to works at Pitt State University. So this is a big, company. I don't know if you want to end it with maybe taking a look at that and showing Katie, what that would look like, and it's Pittsburgh BURG State University. But that is definitely something where there would be far more, information and where this kind of a knowledge base would come up.
Yeah, so hopefully I got the right one, and we've worked with a couple universities, so I'm sort of familiar with how things flow through. Um, so for example, there's your official site, and if you tinker with the descriptions on some of these pages, then you could have something that's a little bit more of a selling point versus a sentence fragment. So right here, this could be something like, online degrees for people who, are going back to the workforce, or maybe the academics is #1 ranked university in Kansas, something like that. So that's one thing you can do. If we jump out to these pages, you can see Google is trying to essentially guess what the information is that's really important on this page. If I, on my PC, right click and view the page source, I'll see what the title is, and then which the title is academics, which is okay, but you can sort of see that if I'm looking for a description, there doesn't seem to be a great description, which is why Google is having such a hard time with it. There's no meta description for this page, so Google's guessing. If you insert a meta description, something that's more useful is going to show up there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Katie, do you have any follow-up questions for that?
No questions. I wish that I was on that team because looking at that was my undergrad. So looking at that makes me like twitch a little,
That's awesome. Well, now you feel like you can go in with some fodder. Look, I've got some proof, and this is what I have to say. I love that. That's really awesome. So tell us a little bit, Josh, about what are some of the common questions that people ask. Like, what gets them to the point where they're like, oh my gosh, I need to work with Josh. What are the pain points?
Yeah, usually they have a lot of money and want to work with some nice people, and that's really sort of the sweet
That's
spot.
your ideal client.
Yeah, and not really concerned about results either is important. No, but seriously, I would say that the first thing people ask a lot about is search engine optimization, and oftentimes they're thinking about it way too early and don't really need to do it. For example, just using you as an example, people Google your name, you show up, it's got a lot of nice results. For the most part, you're done. People aren't hiring you because they search on consultant in Pittsburgh, Kansas, right? It's just you're getting referrals, people are seeing you speak. The odds that someone's doing a cold search and then like, hey, I want to pay you money is at least in my experience, roughly 0.01%. So you don't really need SEO in the traditional manner that you would think of it. You need to make sure when someone searches your name, you're showing up. But spending, $500, $1,000 a month for SEO really isn't going to accomplish much. So I spend a decent amount of time telling people there's a part of SEO you need to worry about, and there's a part of SEO where you're not really getting results out of it. So I would say that's one of the key things that are out there. If you're a relatively new or not a fairly large business, unless your business is based on SEO, you're probably overvaluing what it could do for you.
That is really interesting. In that particular case, would you say that kind of money, if you're trying to drive traffic, would be better spent on Google Ads or something like that that's very directive?
Yeah, I mean, if you were going to spend money online, I'd say you would be better off spending, your $1,000 a month or whatever your marketing budget is, either on AdWords or LinkedIn ads, because you could track it very specifically. Maybe you got, 300 clicks to your site, and then you could track what happened to those clicks rather than hoping you'll move up in the rankings and hoping that you'll get organic traffic and hoping it'll be good traffic. Instead, you could run an ad saying, do you need your car battery changed for $100 in the next 45 minutes, and you're bringing in people who probably are not searching on that unless they have a very specific need.
Mhm. So what you're saying with SEO and maybe an SEO audit is more about this is as tracked in time, maybe after you've had your website out, really doing an audit and then spending the time in order to get things correct so that you know that you're listed correctly. And that really kind of pushes more towards reputation ultimately. But that's not something that you need to be doing and just climbing these ranks to come up organically.
Yeah, not like who you are if you need to be worried about SEO. Like if you're a locksmith and people need to call you for lockouts, I'm probably not calling a bunch of friends. I'm going right to Google. But for most companies, if you Google your name, you'll know if you have an SEO problem or not. I mean, we charge, 5 to 10K on an SEO audit, and that's something that's useful for a big company where if you're getting millions of visits, moving the needle 5 or 10% is huge. If I'm the Mather Group and I get 200 visits a month, and I could maybe get another 10 visits of maybe qualified, maybe not qualified traffic, there are a whole lot of other things that would probably be more useful for me to be doing.
Mhm. So Dexter commented that he is working on Google Ads and specifically, kind of feeling like that's validated for him. So is there anything else you would say about, what happens in terms of, when people are using Google Ads? And I notice this a lot. I notice that my competitors have bought the Google ad keywords of Little Bird Marketing, because when you Google Little Bird Marketing, then they come up first as an ad, and then I come up organically. So, what are your thoughts about that and those kinds of tactics? And obviously, someone must not have budget right now, but I see it pop in and out, and it happens quite a bit.
Yeah. Um, probably my first reaction typically is F them. But it does point out you probably want to do a little bit of AdWords advertising on your own brand name. People hate the fact that they're paying to advertise on their name, but if you do, you'll get like 8 lines of text above your organic result. It'll also block your competitors a little bit. They'll have to pay more to advertise there. So I would recommend doing that. In general, if you're a small business, I would recommend doing the AdWords thing on your search results for exactly that reason, to block people, to block people, get more shelf space in Google. You're doing great, but usually that's not the case, and sort of push off some of your competitors.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is really interesting. I think that's super helpful. And besides, Dexter feels very validated, which is terrific.
Anytime we can do that. And also click on their ads so they get charged
Right.
money.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but that's definitely a strategy. I guess, on one hand, you can really take it as a form of flattery. But Chris, I just want you to know, I've not been buying out your name, so we're all good.
I mean, that's the other thing. Personally, there's a little bit of game theory, but if you're clear that they're advertising specifically on your term, not just on marketing, I might think about advertising on theirs, and then you get into a little prisoner's dilemma of will they drop them? You know, it depends how much that might be worth it, or how competitive you are, or how much of a difference it would make.
Right, right. Or just how feisty you feel on any given.
Really, yes, that would be a huge factor.
That's very awesome. Well, please, everybody who's been on today, this has obviously been very informative. A lot of people, you know, it seems like it's hard to find the right person to ask this. And I mentioned in the comments that, you know, I feel like so many people talk to us about SEO, but you know, I can even tell when they start speaking, I'm like, this person does not know anything. And there's a lot of those kinds of gimmicks out there with vendors, with SEO and, you know, systems, but there's really no end guarantee or actually a strategy for ranking. So it's great to kind of pull back the curtain there and see that. So you can see Josh Greene's information up there with the Mather Group. Absolutely connect with him. Hey, Josh, are you on Twitter? What's your
I'm at Josh_Greene with an E.
Okay. Ooh, you got a good one there. That's his Twitter handle. If everybody just wants to throw in the chat their Twitter handle, I know it's kind of harder to find them, but certainly we can take that, you know, that information out online, and we'd love to keep the conversation going. So, Josh, thank you so much for coming and schooling us on online reputation. And really digital management of our own brands and personal brands.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Awesome. Have a great day, guys. We'll see you next time.